Okay, so welcome everyone to our unique and very special event today. And thanks for joining us at noon rather than our normal 6 p.m. so that we can account for the time difference here in Switzerland. So I'm joined here in Basel by our speaker tonight, Marco Serra, Chief Architect at Novartis, who I will introduce more in a moment. Also here in person with me is Professor Olga Mesa, who's co-director of the architecture program at Roger Williams. And she and I will be serving as a mini audience here in person. And remotely, we're also joined by Professor Andrew Cohen, who was instrumental in making the connection with Marco in the first place and leading to our event today, which includes the opening of the exhibition featuring the Novartis campus in Basel, Switzerland. And that's entitled Inspired, Curious, Unbossed, now on display at Roger Williams School of Architecture, Art, and Historic Preservation. So after my short intro, Marco will say a few words, and then we'll be treated to a virtual tour of the campus that Marco and Adriano Biondo recorded for you all earlier. Adriano is the photographer responsible for the beautiful images in our exhibition right now. And after the virtual tour is complete, we'll have about 15 or 20 minutes of discussion with Marco in which you can participate with the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom window, as we usually do. And then after studio today around 5 p.m., you're all encouraged to visit the exhibition space to celebrate and visit that with some refreshments. I'm told we won't be there. Now, for those of you who are new to the Novartis campus in Basel, I'll just say a few things to orient you, since Marco will do it much more justice in his tour. Novartis is a pharmaceuticals company with operations around the world, and the campus in Basel is intended primarily for research and development. And quite wonderfully, the campus isn't simply a collection of efficiency-based lab and office buildings, but a unique and really stimulating blend of architecture, art, and landscape. As you'll learn in the exhibition, the master plan for the campus by Lampugnani is self-described as being quite permissive of individual expression. And it provided certain height and area guidelines to maintain a grid. And beyond that, really great freedom in design is given to a really amazing international collection of renowned architects who have each interpreted their design brief in interesting and different ways, which results in a really varied and rich kind of tapestry that represents many approaches to design and contemporary architecture today. And now to our guide. Today on this journey to meet the campus. Marco Serra was born in Zurich and received his diploma in architecture from ETHC in 1996. Marco worked at the office of Professor Adrian Meyer in Baden from 1996 to 99, and for Diner and Diner Architects in Basel from 1999 to 2002. He was also a design architect for the conversion of the Abadia Retuerta in Valladolid, Spain, which was converted into a hotel and spa. He's also done a number of projects, which we just saw, beautiful projects here on campus as well. And since 2003, he's worked at Novartis and is responsible for campus master planning efforts and many other things. From 2002 to 2005, he was the designer of the main gate and the project for a parking project, which is quite beautiful as well. On the Novartis campus in Basel. And since 2014, he's served as the global chief architect for Novartis. And he's been very generous to offer us his time this afternoon and join us for the event and support this exhibit, which has been a great collaboration. And so with that, Andrew, maybe you want to say a few words and then I'll hand it over to Marco.
It has been a notion in the world of architecture that that creativity can be stimulated and sponsored by architecture, and Novartis, in the tradition of Jonas Salk and his collaboration with Louis Kahn, has engaged great architects from around the world to give their creativity, including artists and other creative individuals, in the service of stimulating the development and production of ideas. And we have found throughout Novartis's work that there have been a remarkable series of buildings, not just for the basis of making great buildings, but towards the goal of freeing creative minds to come up with solutions to problems that affect mankind and to create an environment for creativity. I met Marco Serra in Basel a few years ago, and I immediately said we have to get him involved at Roger Williams, and he was more than willing to help. The pandemic has slowed our ability to make this happen, but through everyone's perseverance, Adriano Biondo, Marco, Nathan, certainly Heather, we now have an exhibit and look forward to this presentation. So without standing in the way any further, I'd like Marco Serra to take the stand and welcome him to Roger Williams. Welcome, Marco.
So thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Nate. And I would like to start with a big thank you to everybody. Right? It was an incredible experience. Right? I don't know if to say despite or thanks to COVID. Probably both. Because seeing how things can happen in a new way has really been exciting, right? And when I was asked, right, to come there or to have the team here, and you know, we've been thinking about many ways of how we could convey the energy that we experienced when Andrew was here. And today, again, I have to say the benchmark is really high, and I was really amazed to see what happened in the exhibition. I've seen it on boards, and I hope you like the kind of arte povera video that we have done together with Adriano, whom I also would like to thank. I'd like to thank Heather, obviously, Nate and Andrew and Olga being here today. So to me, it is an incredible experience that we have put together, trying to convey what we are trying to accomplish here, which is, I would say, a place where potential every spot is a spot for good ideas and to change the world, right? That was a kind of initial sparking point. I will share just a couple thoughts on my activity, but also on the campus, but then also out of today's wonderful tour that we had on site, and then we'll look at the video. I will look at it almost for the first time, right? And then I hope that we can have a discussion, because a tour is never a one-way thing, right? The biggest and the most important thing are the questions, and that's where things come up. The informality, which is an important piece of the campus. So I've been with the company almost for 20 years now. I've been hired in a kind of anachronistic position because I'm the chief architect or corporate architect, whatever you may want to call it. But the first thing I was asked in my first interview, and that's actually a cool story that I was telling today, was what I intended to do. And I said at the time, maybe a little bit naive, I said I have a good news and the bad news. And the good news is that I'm interested in almost everything. The bad news is that I want to do everything as an architect. And when I left, when the chairman left, he said to me, you know, I've given you all the projects that I would have liked to do myself. And these 2 points actually kind of define what my activity was. Lampugnani, when he designed the master plan, he designed the master plan, and the briefing was very simple: a long-term plan for the maximum potential of this site. Okay, and immediately that makes the topic universal and classic, because you think about urbanism, you think about time, right? And when I'm asked, is the campus completed? You know, I say that's the wrong question, because, you know, if you have a plan which holds over time and which holds urbanistically, you know, you hope that over time the thing is going to be completed. Now, out of potentially 70 buildings, we have built something like 20. And history is not made by the potential of urbanism, but is made by business, is made by evolution. So I've been proposed within let's say, the overall disciplines that would lead this campus, which were art, design, light, urbanism, and landscape. So I was hired as an architect in the company to be a kind of the eye in the company for what I'm sure you know is most of the planners struggling with, is to understand the inside, right, the heart of a company. So I've been doing that over 20 years now in this company. I had also the luxury not only to represent the client, but also to do design myself. You would find that before you know, in the first half of the 20th century, you would find that in the companies. Even after the Second World War, you would find these kind of corporate architects who would do also design, but they disappeared all because of you know, outsourcing, specialization, etc. I'm still doing it, and that is the anachronistic part. The company has changed over these 20 years, right? It went from a kind of silo-based, enclosed, hierarchy structured company, obviously into a more open, interactive, interdisciplinary company. That has also changed in society, right? Cooperations among institutions have changed. Obviously, you have to, because specialization leads to individuality and problems, particularly in pharma. They don't look at disciplines, they look at the totality. So cooperation in this context is important. Why do I tell this? Because the campus project started 20 years ago on own ground with own funding, I would say, fenced, okay, as a production site. Today, the campus is a campus which in 1 year will be opened to other industries, to other institutions. So the way cooperation has changed in the company has dramatically changed. And when you think about long-term and about highest potential of urban plans, you have to think about that too, right? The campus is doing quite well, surprisingly well. The opening to society is something that I would say urbanistically is one of the minor problems. Simply because the campus as an entity has been built up referencing the city as the place of the highest density of knowledge. Okay, so actually the campus is still holding up with new changes. Why did I entitle Inspired, Curious, Unbossed, right? Why did I entitle the company, the exhibition with Inspired, Curious, Unbossed? Actually, for two reasons. First reason is that Inspired, Curious, Unbossed is the last, really the last, I would say, cultural ambition of the company. And it looked a little bit strange to see Inspired, Curious, Unbossed on top of what is something that has been built over the last 20 years, right? But with this, I wanted to test whether the campus as an entity would still hold up with the new culture. And the second thing is because if you wouldn't know that this cultural ambition comes out of a pharma company, you could think that it could be a definition of an artist, for example, right? And I like comparing the artist with Inspired, Curious, and Unbossed. So I liked this idea. That's why I put actually the last cultural change onto a plan which happened over the last 20 years. The other thing I'm giving as an introduction to the video, which I will ask to start in a couple minutes, and which is gonna be, I think, 35 minutes. I hope you have the patience to watch it. Is that I didn't want to structure the exhibition in buildings or in geometries, right? So I took 6 topics out of my personal experience, which I thought would be interesting just to follow as a kind of sounding topics, which were art, vertical interaction, nature, work desks, creativity desks, and facades. Just a few words to each of this. Art already introduced through the Inspired, Curious, Unbossed piece. The topic around art really is to drag people out of their routine, right? One of the hardest things is people falling into their, I think you call it default attitude, right? It's really hard to drag people out of the routine. And that was one reason why art has been very accurately thought as site-specific art. So we did not purchase art and place it, but we always thought art as a site-specific art. We reflected what it should make with the people on a specific site. And you will see a couple of works in there. Vertical interaction is the other hard piece, because you know, in a normal city, obviously there is the common ground, which is the ground floor, but beyond that, people think in floors. Okay, there seems to be a kind of statistic which says everything that goes beyond 50 meters is out of reach for people, right? They just don't go along a path. And then if it has to happen on a vertical basis, it's even harder, because you know, people just don't walk up and down. And we have a couple of really good examples on the campus where through architectural elements, as Nate was introducing also, how can architecture change people? We have a couple of really good examples which show how out of a simple stair you can create really a leading element in a building. And as I think Churchill was the one that said, first we create our buildings and then they create us, right? So there is an important interaction between architecture and us. Nature, nature is an important piece, obviously, and nature is the element where we are hooking up the idea of every single spot can become a spot for good ideas, right? Particularly in nature, because the routine happens on your computer, informality can happen in nature. I had somebody coming to me and say, listen, I don't find any spaces where I can have confidential calls, you know, or meeting rooms are occupied. And so I said to the person, why don't you just sit on a plaza, right? Why don't you sit into the actually most public space, which if you sit there with somebody can become the most intimate space. So thinking about these spaces, about nature in these terms, we have always conceived it as a kind of workspace, right? It was not designing beautiful landscapes just to design beautiful landscapes, but we have always tried to understand how people can work differently in nature. Work desks, I'll take that together with creativity desks, simply because you'll find a couple elements, even art pieces, where we have really given the briefing to the landscape architects, to the artists, or to the architects to create spots for creativity, right? You'll see a beautiful piece by Olafur Eliasson, where he really translates. That was the simple briefing, right? We want actually a kind of a space or creativity desk in a public space. So he created what will be this piece called Oscillation. You will see it during the tour. The background is that every single point should be a creativity desk. And facade simply because we had an interesting discussion. I think Olga asked me a question, how architects relate to each other. Architects actually don't really relate to each other. They are not really interested in each other, right? So we have been trying to bring architects together to discuss, to relate to each other. There's not a big interest. The interest comes from the master plan, simply. We have had a strong master plan here. If you look at the plan, it looks like a rigid plan, but the reason was that we have given very few elements throughout the whole thing, and then the choice was to have different architects, but you know, at a certain point, the influence into architects talking to each other and trying to relate to each other, you know, that was a no-go. So we collapsed at this point. But I have to say that the strong master plan helped us to give a kind of connection through the architectures. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Thank you again, really, and I hope you enjoy the video. And I'll we'll be back for a more discussion rather than a Q&A. I hope you'll participate on that one. Yeah, thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, Andrew, can you just confirm you can see that? Sorry, can you say yes or no? I'm sorry, we lost your little.
Yes.
Thanks a lot. Okay, here we go, everybody. Full screen, not actually, I think it's full screen.
So welcome. I'm Marco Serra, and the person that you don't see is Adriano Biondo, but I'm sure you will see him sooner or later within this movie. Welcome to the Novartis campus here, even if on a virtual basis. We are here, and COVID makes it possible to have a virtual tour together with you and a beautiful weather. So I'll walk you through the campus and will hope to not to replace reality, but at least to give you a good impression of what the campus is. So we are standing here in front of the main gate, and that's where most of the visits begin, the visits of associates, guests, and even in your case. The main gate is a project that I was allowed to design as a corporate architect, and it indicates the beginning of at the moment, a fenced and protected campus site for research, development, but not only. A site which will soon be opened to public and made an integral part of the city.
Okay, everybody, just 1 second here. We're gonna try to fix this volume issue.
On the square.
Yeah,
Covering the video.
yeah, I think that was the chat box. We're gonna start that again, everybody. Okay, and I'll chop that out. Don't worry. That was only a minute. Okay, so I want to make sure we are. Sorry. Andrew, you want to turn your video off? I think that'll help. Stop video. Okay. Now we're also gonna mute ourselves.
So welcome. I'm Marco Serra, and the person that you don't see is Adriano Biondo, but I'm sure you will see him sooner or later within this movie. Welcome to the Novartis campus here, even if on a virtual basis. We are here, and COVID makes it possible to have a virtual tour together with you and a beautiful weather. So I'll walk you through the campus and will hope to not to replace reality, but at least to give you a good impression of what the campus is. So we are standing here in front of the main gate, and that's where most of the visits begin, the visits of associates, guests, and even in your case. The main gate is a project that I was allowed to design as a corporate architect, and it indicates the beginning of at the moment, a fenced and protected campus site for research, development, but not only. A site which will soon be opened to public and made an integral part of the city. So let's walk, let's start. Let me say a couple words to this project. You have walked through the park of Günther Vogt, which we will see again at the end of our tour. And this is the building designed by Seshima Nishizawa, Sana, yeah? And it is a glass building that came out of a competition. The interesting piece here is immediately visible as you enter into that courtyard. What was assumed as a kind of a block building, okay, with a depth of 20 meters, finally became a kind of building with an inner courtyard, which led to the very thin bodies of the building. They have a depth of almost 5 meters. So here you are working within two facades, which creates totally transparent atmosphere, loved by the extroverts, struggled a little bit more by the introverts, but finally a fantastic building which really celebrates the transparency of contemporary architecture. So remember the topic around vertical interactions, right? Which is one of the biggest challenges that you face in buildings. This is a project designed and implemented by Vittorio Magnago Lampugnani, who is the master planner for the campus and has been involved from the very beginning into the thinking, but also the making of the campus, which is an incredible asset, right? Having the thinker being involved in all of the singular projects. With this building, he illustrated the way he translates his principles into space, and he used the main stair as the element which is not just connecting floor to floor, but which is also connecting people, right? So the idea is that the whole life is developing around this stair. In fact, if we would go up, you would see that on the landings you will find the meeting rooms, which become a kind of connecting elements between the different floors, and that the bridges that cross the stair make the stair become not just walking space, but space for communication and interaction. Beyond that, Vittorio also established a roof garden in this building, where we will not be able to go at the moment, but the roof garden is a kind of element available to everybody. It's a replacement of the spot itself, right? And everybody on the campus has access. So one of the things that we try to implement in every building is pieces that belong to everybody. Because we wanted to go away from the silo thinking, right, from the functional delimitation in singular buildings, and we will find this element again in other buildings, like the roof garden here, which is really try to drag people out of other buildings into this building. There's also a restaurant on the ground floor called Dodici, which stands for 12, which is the number of the address in the house. And of course, that restaurant belongs to everybody too. So what you've seen before entering the building designed by Frank Gehry was the park designed by Günther Vogt, where we would find an art piece by Laurie Anderson, and art is playing an important role, as we have seen here. We choose to have an audio art piece by Laurie Anderson, because visually the place, as you have seen, is already very occupied. And Laurie, with her audio work, is trying to drag people out of their routine, and that is an important piece when we think about art, dragging people into the unknown, out of their daily predicted routes, if you will. So here we are in the building designed by Frank Gehry. We are on the top floor, where we have installed a library. The building by Frank Gehry, as you might imagine, has been a challenge within the relatively strict design of the master plan by Lampugnani, but it fits wonderfully. It fits because we positioned it in a spot where it really can unfold its forms, number one. And secondly, because we are using it by human resources, which is a function that is quite extroverted. So Frank's buildings obviously have this quality of attraction, also of internal spaces, interior design. And what happens in here is interviews with potential clients, with potential associates. So we have established a kind of common function, be it an auditorium, be it a restaurant, be it interview rooms for human resources. And within that package, we thought that a library available to everybody on the campus is again one of the pieces that is dragging people out of their routine, of their buildings, into exchange communication with others. So here we are in David Chipperfield's building, and one topic here obviously is the topic around work desks. This is a lab building and has been a field of testing and researching for what is called Lab of the Future. But finally, it is really about work desks. What you see in my back is a top front image taken by a section of the building. So on the lower part you see the south facade, on the upper part you see the north facade. In between you see the lab desks, and as you can imagine, this looking at the image is quite a disruptive layout for a lab building, because not only have the labs been combined into one morphology where interaction is the highest message, but also the form are very fluid. And that topic is not just a topic of layout, but obviously it's a topic of culture. And as you can imagine, researchers also need their privacy and their focus, and that has been a challenge in this building. What we have provided to cover the aspects of informality, focus, and concentration is a common floor, on the top floor, where we give credit to common functions, be it small meeting rooms, be it relax areas, and so this floor has to be, the floor that you're seeing on that image has to be read in conjunction with the top floor, where we will go now. So what you have seen now, after passing the building of David Chipperfield, was a big sculpture by Richard Serra, and its title is Dirk's Pot. And Dirk was the photographer whom he dedicated the work to, who unfortunately passed, I think during, if not before, implementation of the work. And the pod obviously refers to the pod whale. That was the first project we realized, even before realizing any building, any new building, because we wanted to give credit to the back entrance, which is the entrance where associates come in from France. You know that we are at the border to France here. And this work has been conceived out of a torus form, right? Out of a circular volume, cut, deformed and recomposed into these 5 big pieces that have a weight of 16 tons per element, 32 tons per sculpture, and 160 tons in total. What you have seen in my back is a work by the African artist, Ghanese artist El Anatsui, and it's composed of bottle tops of wine bottles. It's composed out of a million pieces, as I was told, and if not a million, then approximately a million. And it carries the topic of not of recycling, right? Because recycling sounds like a pretext to throw stuff away, or a good reason to throw stuff away, but of reutilization, which is the highest form of recycling, obviously. So reutilization in this context is an important piece. It's situated in this building designed by Tadao Ando, which is a research building. So it is inherently embracing the topic around life cycle. So we walked now from the building of David Chipperfield along the building of Juan Navarro Baldeweg onto what we call the square, designed by Good Form Studio from the US. And we are in bike parking now that I designed as a design architect. And you have also seen that there was a pavilion in the park, a glass pavilion, and volumetric greens, and that can be considered kind of creativity desks, right? There is a topic around creativity desks that we have touched, and the idea is really that every singular point on this campus is potentially a creativity desk, because ideas come up where you do not expect them most. And so the glass pavilion on top of this bike parking is a space where people can go anytime when pressure is too high in the office, or when they just want to talk informally. The other experience on the campus we made was that people were struggling sometimes with finding individual offices or individual meeting rooms, so they were asking where they could have confidential calls. Now, what is more confidential than a public space, right? You just sit in a public space and you discuss things unexpectedly. So that's the idea around creativity desks. So as you have seen, there was a kind of vertical garden in Raul Merotra's building, the one that you've seen earlier, which is another good example for vertical interaction, yeah. Which particularly in lab buildings is tricky because there's not only the challenge between different floors, but also between lab and offices. And the vertical garden there is a fantastic example for how to connect among floors, but then also how to interface between lab and offices, where it is extremely important that the work that researchers do can really be balanced between what they do in the laboratory and what they do in the offices. What you're seeing now is a garden by Katrin Gustafsson and Porter, and it is the garden along the Rhine, and that is an extremely important piece within the campus because it connects the campus to nature at different levels. One level obviously is that it interfaces between the campus and the city, and the other thing is that it has opened up a piece of nature which has been inexisting for decades on this campus, and that is the Rhine. The Rhine originally was used obviously to transport substances on ships, obviously, and before the project began, this was a site full of storage spaces, bunkers, harbor, and that has dramatically transformed in a way that the Rhine itself, but also the space, has been integrated into the campus and offers a space for informal interaction for our associates. So what you have just seen is the building of Herzog de Meuron, right? And what you are looking at now is the art piece by Olafur Eliasson, which is a fantastic example for what I like to call creativity desks also in the exhibition. And really the idea to come together in different ways. This piece is called Oscillation, which is referred to a stone falling into the water and creating waves. But what it really does is it gives the possibility to look outside and just read or reflect or look inside and communicate. So introverted and extroverted. The other thing that you can see from here is the exhibition building in my back, which will be inaugurated soon, and this is the last piece of the campus that we are building now for the moment. It's called Exhibition because it tells the story and the history of Novartis and the pharma, obviously, and it will be open to public, and I hope you will be visiting us soon here. Adriano will now lead you through the park. I would like to thank everybody, particularly Adriano. I hope he will show up briefly on the screen. At least you will recognize him once you meet him on the street. But it was a pleasure. I hope you liked it, and I say goodbye.
Okay, let's see if we can get out of our red filter, and then we'll start again for a second. Not the intended outcome. Hang on one second, everybody. Maybe we're just gonna go with red. About that. There we go. Okay. Okay, good. All right, we're back. And so everybody is welcome now to join in on our conversation here. And you can either type into the chat, or you can type into the Q&A, and we'll pick those up. I'll read those to everybody so everybody can hear them, and we'll have Marco chat with us a bit. So we have about 15 or 20 minutes here for a chat. So while you all warm up, maybe I'll start with one, and Olga and Andrew can jump in too. But yeah, so as I was watching that video, which I really appreciate you and Adriano making for us, I think it really brings to life the spatial qualities. I think in complement to the exhibition, it's really nice to kind of feel the space in that video and hear you, narrating for us many interesting ideas here. And one of those that was coming up in my mind was this idea that the campus here is a little bit analogous to the city and how it grows over time, and yet in your role here, you're able to see the whole with cohesion in a way that cities can sometimes lack. And I wondered if you could speak a little bit, share some insights on what it's like to hold and to form that whole, and what it's like to work with kind of an amazing variety of real individuals who may also influence how you see the campus and that whole too.
No, I mean that only this question would be worth a session on itself, right? So I like questions that put fingers into the wound, if you will. Yeah, simply because they help reflect yourself. I would say this has, I would say from the conditions given in the project, this has been a kind of paradise, right? So planning on your own field, with your own funding, with basically using it yourself, is really a kind of paradise conditions, in the sense that you really, if you have the support there, in the corporate support, but also the intellectual support, you can really approach the project in a universality that rarely happens. And the reference of I would say, of the city, right? I mean, take the traditional city, take the modern city, was really the density of knowledge concentrated in one spot, still strongly believing that the physical, there would not be anything that could replace the physical interaction, because that's where creativity happens, right? That's where the unknown happens. That's where the unexpected happens. If you think about yourself, where your best ideas come, they may not come after 7 hours on a computer. So that idea of the city as the highest density, I would say, it was the reference for the campus. But then, I mean, going deeper into your question, I would say, in such a project, or let's put it that way, what differentiates this project from a normal project in the city is that there has been an important project taking care of common interests. And when I say common interests, obviously, if you think about the city, the city represents the common interests. But in what city, except for, let's say, Paris, right? Haussmann, the incredible intervention into Paris. In what city can you give such coherence throughout the city and the variation at the same time, right? Because every project, I mean, there was an overarching planning, the urban plan, which unfortunately I have to say today in reality does not really exist anymore. Urban planners are rather real estate planners, or more on the investor side, but somebody who thinks the city in its universality from the urban point of view is very rarely to happen. And I think that was the difference that you hopefully also could feel. There has been an overarching urban plan, there has been an overarching landscape plan. The buildings have been, individually planned, and the parks also, but there is a linking element. And I would say that's probably one of the qualities that we have taken over from the traditional, but also classic modern city into the project, and which unfortunately I have to say I see lacking more and more in new projects coming up, because the individuality is given to properties of investors, right? That makes the power over the projects, and it's very hard for whatever governmental institution or structure to give the continuity that we all like. In again, I have to take Paris as an example, because that to me is really exemplary how you can connect the city. Yeah,
wonderful. Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, great. I see a number of questions here.
Sure.
Okay. Let's see here. To what do you how do you contribute to the larger commitment to design within Basel as a community and within this region in general, Vitra, etc.? So how do you feel like there is a commitment to design within Basel and as a community and in the larger region?
Well, that's again a question that could take several hours, simply because, and I'm not making it up, it's real, I'm not making it up, because it hints to the evolution of the site, right? The evolution of the site, which began as a kind of enclosed space, site on own property, own function, own funded, opened up as a consequence of opening up collaborations. Also, the campus has to open up, right? But that started already years ago. I think after 5 years where the project was running, we realized that the project had many interactions with the city. So many fields of common interest. And out of the campus project, a new project came up, which was called Campus Plus, which basically means campus plus campus extension. Campus extension was, the meaning of it was all the fields that were of common interest, right? And the fields of common interest obviously were harbor, right? There was a harbor here, which was taken away, high rises, river promenades, exchange of land, we had a public street cutting the campus into two, which we impropriated, which you have not seen now on the tour. But if you would have taped the campus 20 years ago, you would have crossed a public street. So there were 11 projects where we saw that there was an interaction between the city and Novartis. So what we did is we established a collaboration between Novartis and the city, with a funding 50-50 contribution, right? And we commonly elaborated projects of common interest. For example, the promenade that you have seen along the Rhine, that was full of bunkers and harbor pieces that have been taken away, and that is now public space. So there is an immediate, that's why I'm saying you could really talk for hours about this one, because it's a really important project. That was an immediate impact onto the campus, right? Because if you consider this spot where we are, 150 years ago being totally periphery and now being totally urban site, the conditions have changed without doing anything, and you have to take that into account. So the change from production into research and development is not just a big wish out of the business need, but it's also an evolution with which the company has gone with urbanistically, but also at the level of business. So that, I would say, is the biggest impact. We could talk about the impact that we have had on architectural communities, the relation with Vitra and so on, but I would say the biggest impact is this one. If that's okay, I would leave it at that for that question.
Great. Okay, so I'll read one more here. What's the role of flexibility within the master plan and the architecture itself?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. No, it's a difficult one. I can give you a couple examples. I'm not a big friend of the term flexibility, simply because flexibility often leads to kind of neutrality of spaces, if you will, right? It reduces everything down to the minimum and does not replace human qualities. We would have to go and dig deeper into that one, but I could give you one example which was interesting in the evolution of the campus in terms of flexibility. The first briefing was, we want a long-term plan with the highest potential of the master plan, okay? And then the plan turned out that you all will see on the exhibition. And another briefing was, every building should potentially house every kind of function, so office and lab, basically. I have to say that we collapsed on this one, on this flexibility. We had, after I would say 3 years, and after the first lab buildings came up, we had a radical review of the master plan. So we had to split lab and offices, right? So the idea that a city can house everything is probably an illusion. We have exceptions here. We have a lab building. So we came up with a plan where lab buildings and office buildings would have to be determined in what location, trying to cover the utilitaristic plan, obviously, right? You would have to allocate basic functions. That forces you to allocate basic functions, which is what the company didn't want to do. That's why the flexibility request came up. So there is an important limit to flexibility. We had a dramatic review of the master plan, and in fact, if you look onto the master plan, you will recognize at least these two functions. The other thing in terms of flexibility was the question around high rises. We had to stop 2 high-rise projects basically because the assumption to have office and or lab in a high-rise was just wrong, right? So we began to plan 2 high-rises where we integrated labs, and these collapsed. So we had to go back to the original plan of Lampugnani, which is limiting at 25 meters high-rise, okay? Beyond which regulations change dramatically and also cost run dramatically. So we had to backtrack this idea of having labs in high-rises and go back to the original plan. So these 2 things really were hard experiences with stopping projects and reviewing master plans, but related to flexibility, there was a big learning in that. Yeah.
Great. So we'll read maybe one more from the audience
Please.
here. It says, as a quote closed unquote private campus, are you losing some of the connections to a real city that creates other spontaneous interactions? And is there something you might gain or lose by opening the campus?
Well, I mean, I think you're running in open doors here. The evolution shows that architecture has to follow the, I would not say follow, I'm not a big friend of form follows function, but I do think that we are in the service of business, and what I would say, in earlier times, the idea of an isolated institutional activity was imaginable, also because confidentiality was at a different level. Confidentiality was more at the physical level. Now confidentiality, we all know, happens more at the digital level. So the hurdles are new ones, right? And we had to fence the campus because of safety, right? It was not just hiding stuff, it was just safety reasons. All of these elements have changed, right? Physical barriers basically gone, because it's not the real barriers. The real barriers are elsewhere. This is not a production site anymore. Interactions, interinstitutional collaborations become more and more and more important because of specialization. So in these terms, I would say the two things were right at the time, but I would not, or I could not recommend, and I would not like to imagine to go back. So mixing the two things would not be possible, right? I think the right move is happening. Yeah, makes sense.
Thank you, Marco, for a wonderful talk and discussion and a tour to all of us and earlier to us too. I wonder how you've talked a lot how the campus supports different dynamics for creativity and collaboration, right? And also you talked about the role of artists and researchers in the context of this like pharma company. And I wonder in the role of being a curator, how do you communicate this in the design guidelines, or how do you, is it through conversations, or do you very consciously, convey the role of, let's say, curiosity and play to fuel the design of the spaces at a different scale that is not necessarily the urban scale?
No, makes sense. What you're asking. It makes sense in conjunction with not only the Basel campus, but other campuses that the company has designed and worked out. So we had 4 main campuses, Basel being one, the important or the biggest one, but then also Shanghai, East Hanover, and Cambridge. And we have thought a lot about this question, right? How you can grasp, or how you can quantify, or how you can formulate kind of guidance, if you will, that would grasp this one. And I have to say that we decided not to go into that one, simply because we did not want to translate ideas into corporate actions or corporate architecture, right? Which is something that you often see. I mean, of course, I mean, if I'm not going to name any company here, but there's many companies you could look at and you would recognize them. These 4 campuses are recognizable, but not because they have similar elements, but because they have similar souls.
Yeah.
And the reason is simple. We made a decision that we wanted to have decision making being condensed in a group that would go from project to project and from campus to campus and take some decisions, rather than trying to build one and then issue a guideline and then replicate, right? So the idea was to go through people, through minds, through thinking, and the experience that you would do in one location would allow you to take a decision in another location, which would be thought through the same brain and create a kind of family, if you will. But with the possibility also to learn, to evolve, and not to to make it recognizable throughout what would be a corporate language.
Yeah.
So that was the idea on a big scale. And then on a smaller scale, you could think about, for example, we had somebody who built, our project manager who built the Gehry building here in Basel, went to Shanghai and then built the Shanghai campus. So, you know, there's knowledge, you can put knowledge on paper, but knowledge is in brains.
Yeah. But you seem to extract or inspire this to happen or to manifest through material or through the design of spaces at different scales. And so perhaps it's just through conversation and through being a curator.
Yeah, there has been obviously principles, right? We wanted the workspace. You have to see that 20 years ago, this was a site where tracks were running on the side, where the harbor was near, where there was no common space, no public space, where two companies had come together. The target was to create a new company.
Right.
So different thing. Now you see the campus done. After 2 years of project, the company had a new face.
Yeah.
Right. And the important thing was there to create a public ground to give warmth and to give welcomeness to this site, because it was not welcoming.
Yeah.
So this was, you know, there were principles of course, going away from the hierarchically structured spaces, from the cold spaces, from the very technocratic or even industrial side into new spaces. These were, then the choices were made. Now you can make A or Z choices. You can make good or bad choices. There has been a kind of taste or intellect in making the choice, but all happened through brains.
Yep. Great, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's check in on audience. If not, Andrew, please feel free. Oh wait, here we go.
Loves going to Basel. His hard work is very appreciated. Thanks a lot. That's from Peter. Peter. Yeah, thanks a lot. It's good to hear that. I'm in contact. I'm acting globally, so I'm in contact with lots of people, and I don't know who you're referring to, but thank you for the comment. I think that is not a secondary comment. It's important to love going to the campus, and there's one little story where I think it was even the chairman who was trying to get somebody to work for Novartis, and the person said, listen, it's a fantastic company, I would love to work for you, but I'm not going to come and work here. So that was one reason why also, you know, probably there was a push in making this place a place. I mean, the Basel folks don't like what I'm going to say, right? You do not necessarily come to Basel for Basel, while you know you're competing with I don't know, Barcelona, Cambridge, Boston, and so on. Although Basel is a nice city, obviously, but you know you're in a competition, and the campus, I would say, has reached that point of welcome. So thank you, Pete.
Yeah, so just for everybody, Marco could read that question, but the comment was really that came from Peter, and it says a close friend of mine works at the Novartis campus in Cambridge and worked with Marco, and Marco should know that he loves the buildings and loves going to Basel. His hard work is very appreciated. So that's where that comment came from.
Thank you.
Okay, so maybe Andrew, if you want to jump in, feel free, and if not, we'll leave another minute for the audience to add one more question. I think we have time for about that, and then we'll wrap.
Well, I certainly hope that everybody gets a chance to see the exhibition, which opens tonight, and I know that it will be inspirational on many levels. You know, I noted a number of thesis students and thesis prep students who are among our audience, and we hope that they spread the word. So I want to thank Marco for joining us today and everything that he's contributed. It is interesting to look at a corporation as a driver for architectural creativity, and I think that Novartis has been unique among other kinds of large research and industrial corporations is sort of staking out that terrain, and we certainly appreciate the care and the amazing kind of details that show up in these kinds of projects. I love the garden, you know, the sort of knife edge gardens in the middle with these sort of impeccable detailing, and the field of crystal balls, you know, sort of hovering over the green. You know, just amazing creativity that I know is stimulating to the people who work in those kinds of spaces. The fear is always that with so much to think about and so many things to respond to architecturally, when do you ever get a chance to do any work? You know, it's like if you go to work there, you could spend the whole day just, you know, sort of drinking in the environment. But I suppose if you're there long enough, you sort of know what you have to do. And the architecture makes you feel good every day. But, you know, we would just be like in a playground exploring. But the people who work there.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
The people who work there, you know, it sort of recedes to being a kind of an underlayment that makes them, you know, that spurs their creativity rather than a distraction.
It's the
But
opposite,
I think it's
Andrew.
fantastic.
It's the opposite. Unfortunately, it's the opposite. We are investing a big deal in making people aware of the quality that is around them, because often the workplace for people is this now more and more the screen, or it was their office space. Now it's become the table. It's moved to the screen, and it's moving to the handy. So unfortunately, you have to invest a big deal in people really using these spaces that now we have seen them empty because of pandemics, right? But even with big folks, you have to drag people out of their routine. It's really the opposite, right? I mean, I'm sure if you ask people, everybody will say it's fantastic, it's beautiful. Are they sitting outside and trying to get a meeting in a different way? I see lots of people, but it's not that people is somewhere on a moon or on a paradise thing. It's really the opposite. So we are struggling. Somebody came to me and said, "I'm so depressed. I have been moved from a new building into an old building." And then I said, well, you know what? I've been working 20 years on new buildings. I've never had my workplace in a new building. I've always worked in old buildings. I should be totally depressed. And so what hinders you from going there? Yeah. And she says, because I'm working in the old building, and nothing hinders you from using other spaces, right? And that's the thing, and that's hard. That's actually hard to drag people out of their routine, default. Thank you, but thank you for your comment. It's really important one. It's really an important one. Thank you, Andrew.
Okay, well, I think it's been a really delightful evening, and thanks everyone for joining us. And I hope you enjoy the exhibition opening. And if you don't get to go to that, then enjoy the exhibition for the next month and a half while it's up. And I appreciate your questions, and we'll see you next time. Thanks to Andrew and Olga and Heather and John for helping with the exhibition. And thanks again, Marco.
No, thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of you. Hope to see you soon, somewhere.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Bye, Andrew. Bye, Heather. Bye, guys.